Got a question for you. Are you an ever or an ever? Not sure? Think more along the lines of fairy tale heroes and villains. That's the driving force behind the School for Good and Evil series. And joining us today to tell us about the newest addition to this trilogy series is author and filmmaker Soman Chainani. Soman, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it so much. For those of us who are not familiar with the series, give me the breakdown of the School for Good and Evil.
You know, it's sort of a series that turns fairy tales on its head and sort of, I think, rescues them from the Disney sanitizations that we've seen over the years. And so the idea is to bring the stories back to kind of the original Grimm's balance of lightness and darkness that really is much more about a survival guide to life for kids than just kind of a pursuit of happily ever after with the prince or princess. And so what I wanted to do is kind of start with a princess and a witch, Disney style, you know, the ultimate pink wearing, blonde, you know, singing princess who hangs out with animals, and her witchy best friend who lives in a graveyard and is kind of the scariest girl in town, and they're best friends. Okay. And they're going to go to this School for Good and Evil, except they get switched. And so the question is, why do they get switched? You know, what happened along the way? You know, who are these girls? And so that really is what takes us across these three books.
Okay, so tell me, the second in the book is A World Without Princes. Tell me about that.
So the second book is much more about boys versus girls rather than good versus evil. But just like the first book, it takes those terms and you think you know what a boy is or a girl is in a fairy tale world. And by the end of the book, it completely sort of messes with them. And so, you know, the whole series is about taking things that we take for granted from Disney and from life and then sort of just, you know, rupturing them by the end.
So how do you come up with these ideas?
You know, I think it just comes down to what you loved as a kid. You know, I used to love Disney movies as a kid and watched every animated movie at least 50 times. But then when I went to college and discovered the original Grimm stories, there was this disconnect, and I realized that, all right, somehow we went from the darkness and kind of grittiness and texture of the Grimm stories to kind of this fluff of the Disney movies. What happened? You know, and why were those kids able to handle that and our kids not? And so it raises questions that you then want to answer through your own art.
Okay, so author and filmmaker, how do the books differ from what we'll see on screen?
You know, the movies by nature are so short form. You know, they're 2 hours long, whereas the audiobook for The School for Good and Evil takes, 13 hours to listen to. So you're talking 11 hours worth of material that can't necessarily be in there. So what you have to do with the movie is really focus on what is this thing about at its core, which is it's about two girls, two girls who are best friends, and you realize that ultimately it's about a princess and a witch whose identities are switched, and in the process come to realize that a princess and a witch are actually quite the same person, because neither of them are happy on their own terms. They're searching for identity, they're searching for happiness, and so it's ultimately about, sort of the dual nature of a princess and a witch.
So are the movies coming out soon?
Yeah, hopefully it's going to be mid-2016, and they'll be shooting next year. And they're being produced by the guys who made Alice in Wonderland and, the Oz movies and Snow White and the Huntsman. So there'll be giant fairy tale spectaculars, big action sequences, just enormous visuals. So they should be pretty awesome.
Coming up pretty soon. Okay, so I mentioned it when we first started. I never did really ask you the question. What's an ever? What's a never?
So an ever goes to the School for Good and believes in, ever after and pursues love at all costs. Whereas a never goes to the School for Evil and believes in nevermore, or this idea of, power is more important than love. So this question is at the depth of each of our soul, do we pursue love in our life or do we pursue power? And my argument is, we're not going to demonize either one in this book. We're just going to divide it into two types of people. And so you can go online at schoolforgoodandevil.com, and we actually created a quiz to see if you are an ever or a never, and over 400,000 people have taken it around the world. We post the highest scores every day, and it just really makes you take a really deep look at what you would do in an uncomfortable or awkward ethical situation, and analyzes your soul that way. And I've taken it a bunch of times and always end up evil no matter what I do. So there you go.
Filmmaker and author Soman Chainani, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, if you'd like to read more about what Soman just talked about, all you have to do is go to DelmarvaLife.com and click on the show tab. Okay, now someone mentioned that he's a never. Well, up next on Delmarva Life, Lisa and I are going to find out what we are when we take the ever or never test. And we're going to announce today's Delmarva Life Summer Countdown winner. Delmarva Life, we'll be right back.